Garlic, and before I start, may I just add a little bit more about myself. I like to collect stones. Not the sort that get set in rings and pendants, but stones and pebbles that lie around on your path and that sometimes have the most glorious colors, textures, and shapes. I'm fascinated by patterns on tiny seashells that you find on the beach, and by the soft, smooth, tender pink of baby leaves of the peepal tree. Coming back to stones again, there are some that might just surprise you, not only by their texture and color, but by what they contain inside of them. Puzzled? Yes. I brought this stone to show you. It's smooth, it's black, it's beautiful, yes. But let's look inside it, and if you break it open, it contains a perfect snail fossil. And that has made this stone a very precious stone for me. This story I wrote more than 10 years ago. When I met Shakuntala, I was working as an officer in the State Bank. On all weekdays on my way home, I'd now be walking through the market and picking up provisions for the kitchen. And I found another treasure. To the story then, garlic. Mumbai is a city of commerce and finance, of tight schedules and busy lives. Matunga is a local railway station for the commuters of the city. On the way to City Light from Matunga station stands Sentinel, an enormous rain tree, strong and deeply rooted. Its canopy of deep green spans high across from the left side of the road to its right. Under its tender shade, I've seen her sitting every day as she sells coriander, garlic, ginger, green chilies, and mint leaves. She tells me she's been there for the past 40 years. Like a pigeon that periodically pecks at its feathers and fluffs them out, she chooses individual bunches of herbs, gives them a shake, picks out an unsightly leaf, and after granting her approval, stacks them back into the basket. She's a thick-set woman with coffee-colored skin, bespectacled eyes, shiny jet black hair pulled tightly back into a no-nonsense knot, star-shaped earrings, and a long Mangal Sutra that she periodically pulls out over her sari or tucks back into her ample bosom. She loves to speak, and ever so often I find myself enchanted by her talk, for she has a surprisingly sweet voice that one might not expect in such an imposing frame. After a long, hard day at the bank, immersed in debits, credits, loan appraisals, book balancing, it affords a thankful break to hear her speak and share her life. Her talk is restricted to her world, home, children, other vendors on the street, the time when she was young, her village, and most importantly, the inevitable focus of her very sharp tongue, her husband. He is tall, thin, and silent, but with a flashing smile that, originating from his lips, travels all over his face like a counter in a pinball machine. He sits beside her occasionally to sell dry spices, cumin, pepper, cinnamon, anise, cloves, and coriander seeds in minuscule portions that suffice only for one meal. And he does most of the listening, nodding, and smiling as she talks on. She knows the exact genealogy of her wares as she extols the virtues of ginger from Satara, coriander from Pune, lemons from Nagpur, and chilies from Khed and Kolhapur, the land of origin then justifying her higher prices. Complain to her about the price, and she will give you a list of the rise in price of all goods and services around you in such exhaustive detail that it could put a statistician compiling the current consumer price index to shame. So then, if all these things are becoming more scarce, how will the price of garlic remain the same? And then on to some philosophizing. Everything is getting more and more expensive. The only thing going cheap today is human life, isn't it? Of what value is our life now? Then we travel back home to her village. In the Gaon, we can happily live in a fraction of our expenses here. But the children refuse to stay in the village. Now my boy, he's 12th standard failed. She says to me, "Bye, please find him a job. He can't study further but wants to work in an office. I made him sit here with me, but he's ashamed to be on the street selling ginger and lemons. What do I do? Will it help to sit at home doing nothing instead?" The question, of course, is rhetorical. But then he sits here with sullen looks fit to drive all the custom away. So I sent him off to the village to do farming. It's the family land, rich black soil. They take 3 crops a year. But do they send even a sackful of jowar to the city? No, they only think of us when they need money. A man stops by to ask the price of garlic. And like an expert software engineer, she effortlessly switches frames. I wait. The man bargains. She's steadfast. No bargaining if you want quality. She wins. Transaction over, and she switches back to our frame again. As though we were earning potfuls every day, she says. And then the inevitable slide to pour down on her significant other, whom she calls Rao. We too have a daughter to be married off. When we are in need, will anyone help? Ha! Does he understand this? They just have to hint, and he goes jumping off to send the money order. I've said it every time. We save one paise to be able to find a decent home for our girl. And when his brother drinks away all the land earnings and gets indebted to boot, Rao goes and blows off all our savings on that no-good brother of his. The land yields enough for all the family, but I say, I don't want a single grain from there. Let us lead our life in peace, such as it is. We brought up our kids decently, never spread our hands before anyone for alms, lived by our own labor, never coveted what someone else claimed. How much more will they look towards us? All this, while the man listens with a half-apologetic, half-indulgent smile that seems to say, yes, she raves and rants and lets off steam. God knows, she's done enough for the family, stood strong by my side through good times and bad, like the volcanic rock of the Deccan Plateau that she hails from. It seemed to me that within this relationship, she had the liberty to air her opinions and he to take the decisions. Maybe her diatribes shaped his thoughts. Maybe they didn't. Clearly, however, in this equation, both had a long rope, but were nevertheless attached to each other by an equal sign, a plus on one side, cancelling a minus on the other. Bemused and touched by this couple, I collect my herbs for the day and walk on homewards. While cleaning out the veggies at home, I think of her. She'll have gone back to her kholi too, up the well-worn wooden staircase of her chawl in the labor camp. I've been out of town for a while, taken a break from work to plan out a different course for myself. I left my job and decided to focus on writing and painting. The transition from banker to writer-painter, and as it so happened, also mother, leaves little room to, as the good poet says, stand and stare. But eventually, things settle down and a semblance of a routine is established, which routine also includes a regular trip to the market. I'm curious to see my friend again. It's been so long since I met her. Sure enough, they're still there, sitting side by side under the rain tree. I take that familiar break to speak with her and ask how things are going for her. The son, a strapping, tall, dark and broad-shouldered young man, is back from the village. Unable to farm, he sits on an upturned wooden crate, staring at the garlic, waiting for an office job to land into his lap. Daughter's marriage is postponed because the kitty that was saved up had to be sent back home to settle the brother's debts. Of course, the tirade that this narration evokes is pure vitriol. Having spewed it though, she goes back, now calm, to inspecting and priming the herbs before her while her husband smiles a sad smile with downcast eyes. She gives the bunch of mint leaves an extra vigorous shake and thrashes the curry leaves a little harder on the basket, and life goes on like it always does. Luckily, the son did finally get his office job. Though they paid him a pittance, my woman had a new sparkle in her eyes. And the fact that the daughter too had been successfully married added to their brilliance. The chaiwala walked by, and we order a cutting chai between us in celebration, raising a toast to this happy turn of events. But the celebrations, unfortunately, are short-lived. Yes, Rao has gone to the village. His brother's wife, fed up with his drinking, immolated herself. On seeing this, Rao's brother sozzled as usual, then doused himself with kerosene and put a match to it. The troubles just don't end for my poor man. Took care of his brother like a child, saw to his every need first and then the rest of us. Was available at his every beck and call, forgave him every time and spent the last paise of our savings to get him out of trouble, and the reward is this. A week later, sitting beside her on that same upturned wooden crate is a small 7-year-old boy with very dark skin, thick curly hair and large eyes that look almost coal-lined. Who's this, I ask? The nephew, of course. Both parents with no sense of their responsibility have killed themselves, and now this orphan is here, an additional burden for me to take care of. How could I refuse? It's family, after all. We have to bear the responsibilities that life throws at us, isn't it? So I said, let him come. He'll sit here with me and make himself useful. Unless he helps out in the earning, how am I to feed him? All this, while that little boy sits there with an uncomprehending, shy smile. I'm angered at this insensitivity towards the feelings of the kid. A child rights activist might protest that the woman does not send him to school and is indulging in child labor. Then, as the days go by, I see how soon he learns the genealogy of all the herbs. See how quickly he darts about running errands for her, whom he now calls I, mother. How he hops to the car to deliver my bunch of coriander before the signal turns green. how his eyes light up when I call him by his name. I also see how she stops the kulfi wala as he walks by tinkling a bell to buy that kid a rose-flavored ice candy. He eats half of it and shares the rest with a wayside pup that he has in turn adopted. I see a woman who, with only a tenuous claim over this 4 by 4 feet of pavement, has taken care of her family, raised and educated her kids, held decency and honor as her prized possessions, and has now included an orphaned boy into her life and taken on the responsibility to shelter him, just like that rain tree has sheltered her for the past 40 years. Then I look at the newspaper in which that boy has wrapped and handed me my garlic. The headlines speak of glittering scions of Indian industry who are at each other's throats, going to perverse lengths to seek restraining orders and injunctions against their own mothers, brothers and sisters to establish claims over property. So, I go home and I put those headlines into the trash bin and the garlic on the kitchen shelf from where I use it to heal my body, nourish my family, and cleanse my soul. Thank you.